Welcome everybody to this session on which will deal with the nexus between climate change and migration. I'm very, very honored that we have such an expert panel who are all available and willing to be part of this session. So thank you very much for joining us. Also to the participants, thank you for your interest for joining this session. Welcome to all of you. This is a virtual Gobeshona. We are normally in a big conference room, and so, but during this time, of course, we have to do a lot of things virtually. But this meant that, in fact, we were able to also join from other countries. So it has that advantage that we now have a global Gobeshona. So yeah, I'm very pleased that we can be part of this. I'm very pleased that we can present this research, and very happy to moderate this session and hear from the different presenters, from the different panelists and their expert opinions. So yeah, just very quickly, we all know with changing environment due to climate change, local communities have had to deal with these changes and yeah, have had to look at what their options are, and especially for vulnerable, poor communities and households. What does this mean? How are they coping? Huh? And in this session, we will particularly look at one of those coping mechanisms, which is migration, internal migration in this case. And so in this session, we will look and discuss further about this nexus, climate change and migration, what it means for communities, what is their perspective on this, and what are the impacts, positive and negative. And we will also reflect on some policy choices that Bangladesh may have, and link also with the global discourse on this climate change and migration nexus. So I would like to invite Shakirul from OKUP, the chairperson from OKUP, to start his presentation and present us a keynote paper on the research that was conducted. Thank you, Shakirul.
Yes.
And while Mr. Shakirul getting prepared, I would also like to welcome Professor Hawk with us. We are lucky that we have got Professor Dr. Hawk with us. So if he remains with us, we will request him to also reflect us in the discussion with his thoughts and insights. Welcome, Mr. Professor Hawk.
Thank you. So can I start now? Do you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, okay. We can hear you. So Shakirul bhai, you will try to manage the whole presentation within 15 minutes, and after 12 minutes, I'll be notifying you. Eh? Okay? Okay,
okay, great. So dear moderator, Celestine, Miss Celestine, the respected panel speakers, participants, colleagues, friends, good afternoon and good morning to everybody. And it's my pleasure to present this research publication entitled Insights of Human Mobility in the Context of Climate Change, an action which is an action research conducted in the southwest coastal belt of Bangladesh. And I like to thank Helvetas Swiss International to bring OKUP in its consortium project called Pani Jibon to look at the human mobility in the context of climate change. So it is really a good pleasure for us to conduct this research, and being a migrant organization, actually, when we are focused on the rights of the migrant workers, the protection of the migrant workers, this is the first insights that we have gained from this research to understand the nexus between climate change and migration. So I just want to start by giving a human story as a background of our research, that why actually we thought to undertake this research. So this is a case story of a person named Shukumar, who was 37 years old in last year actually, when we interviewed him, and he was from Koira Upojela under Khulna district. He said, quote, "In earlier times, most of the people in my village lived on agriculture, as there was plenty of agricultural land in the village. But now most of the farmland is just clogged by saline water. In 2009, Cyclone Aila brought seawater and submerged the whole village. The water was locked in the entire area for around 3 years. Even these days, seawater often enters the village during the high tide. Many parts of our village have turned into wetlands nowadays. As a result, there has been a decrease in farmland and fishing ponds, and hence a lack of work in the village." If I go to the next slide, it is basically the context of, the statistical reports and different literatures that actually says the context of climate change effects in Bangladesh. And it says that because of the location and topography, Bangladesh is one of the countries which is mostly vulnerable to climate change. The World Disaster Report 2018 ranked Bangladesh 8th among countries most vulnerable to extreme weather conditions. The Climate Risk Index 2019 positioned Bangladesh as one of the top sufferers from extreme weather events. And if we look at the context and history since 2000, since 2000, and then we see that since 2000, Bangladesh actually encountered number of cyclones, including Cedar in 2008, and then Nargis in 2000. Cedar in 2007, Nargis in 2008, and then Ayla in 2009. And then these actually, it means that the Bangladesh is encountering the climate change hazards more frequently, and it causes, cyclones, storms, floods, erosion, as well as intensified the salinization in groundwater, air, and land. We also know that the sudden onset extreme events cause huge damages of assets like house, agricultural farms, livestock, and so on. And after the Ayla, we can remember that it was a huge report that it destroys about more than 500,000 houses, and partially damages another 500,000 houses, and more than 9 million people together was infected by the cyclone Ayla. So the extreme events also cause huge loss of income. On the other hand, this is very significant that the slow onset disasters, such as increasing salinity in the soil, water, and air, have critical impacts on losing traditional livelihoods in coastal areas, which results actually in forced migration in many cases that we actually try to understand from these research. On this background, actually, we undertaken jointly with Helvetas to conduct these research and this research was financed by the CNRS. As I already mentioned, that research has been implemented under a consortium project, which is called Pani Jivan, Water for Life. And Helvetas International is the lead of this consortium. And we have other partners like BDPC, DORF, ICARD with us to implement different components of this project. So under the project, the research has been actually conducted, and we have two specific objectives of this research. The first one is to understand how the changing environment impacts on local livelihoods opportunities in the research area and how it influences on local migration patterns. And the second one was to have insights into the individual struggles of women and men facing the impacts of climate change and human mobility. So based on these objectives, we conducted our research and we follow a mixed method approach which is combined by quantitative research and qualitative research. The quantitative research actually was, we conducted survey under the quantitative research. The first survey was conducted in 2018, and then we again, conducted a second survey in 2020, and both the cases we actually surveyed the same respondents that we surveyed in 2018. We surveyed them in the second survey as well. And in survey, we actually identified 480 households through multiple stratified sampling method, from the villages that we covered under the project unions. And in terms of qualitative research, we actually conducted in-depth interview for detailed case studies, and the participants of in-depth interviews were identified among the 480 households, and we actually identified 20 person from these 480 households based on 4 criteria that it actually represent the whole community in the region. And the criteria were who have migration experiences, the income level of households, the household patterns, and also the age. And age was important because we actually identify those who have who were aged more than 30 years, so that they can they have their own experiences to share with us in terms of the climate change effects. So that's the methodology that we followed for conducting this research. And our research location was 3 upazilas that I say that we actually covered under the Panijibon project. The 2 upazilas from Khulna district, which are Paikgacha and Koida, and also we have Morolganj upazila under Bagherhat district. And if you look at the map on the slide, that both the districts are very much exposed to the Bay of Bengal, and also the unions and villages that we actually covered under this research. So there were 14 unions, and we selected 5 villages from each union. So it means that we covered 70 villages for this particular action research. If I go to the next slide, it is in terms of the key findings of the research. The first findings, I will say that the research found that all 14 unions under these 3 upazilas are critically affected by cyclones. And it is also important to mention that all the unions are critically affected by the increased level of salinity in land, water, and air. And in terms of in comparison, cyclones or cyclones and the onset slow effects, I will say that all the unions and the villages under the project area were critically affected by salinity. The level of impact of salinity is higher even than the sudden attacks like cyclones, storms. On the other hand, floods and erosion are also critical to have impacts on the lives and livelihood in the unions and villages. So when all the unions are critically affected by slow and sudden onset disasters, we found that 37% households of our among the research participants suffered from loss of agriculture, and 45% say that they have loss of fisheries projects, because many people in that area depend on fisheries as livelihood options. 41% say that they have loss of livestock farming, and these the fisheries, livestock, and the agricultural products all are affected by both sudden and slow onset impacts of the climate change, and all this has an impact on income and well-being, because of the loss of all agriculture, fisheries and livestock farming. They become the loser of income and well-being. On the other hand, it is very significant that 77% household in the area say they are severely affected by the salinization of land and water, and the salinization of land and water has critical impact on traditional livelihood options in the whole region. On the other hand, 34% household say that they face both increased shortage and unavailability of safe drinking water near their home states, and it has a critical implication on health and well-being of the families and the people in that region. So these are the key findings that actually relates the impacts of climate change on the lives and livelihoods of the people in that region. Then if we actually discuss about the frequency and intensity of this kind of natural climate change disasters, so our research shows that it's very much frequent at this in the last 2 decades, I would say since 2000, and it actually gives little time to the people to recover from one disaster to another, and that's why our research actually came up with this statement that climate change is a threat multiplier, which is already sensitive and vulnerable on the already sensitive and vulnerable coastal ecosystems and livelihoods. So if it is the condition that the climate change has an impact, multiple impact on the coastal areas, ecosystem and livelihoods, then what are the coping strategies that the people in that area actually take? Our research find that the people usually, after any disasters, even sudden disasters, particularly the sudden disasters, they try to build their livelihoods on the same livelihoods that actually that was before the shock of the climate change. And most of the cases, they take loan as a strategy. As a strategy to rebuild their previous livelihoods, and if they are failed, because most of the cases we found that the people fail to build their livelihoods of the same because of the impacts of salinity, because of the impacts of another cyclones, storms, floods, etc. So they are not successful in their first try, and then actually they come to join the local labor market, particularly as a day laborer, rickshaw puller, art digging, and so many local local level job markets. But our research actually find that when the people try to build their own livelihoods and then fail, and then they try for local jobs, but around 40%, 45%, 43% people are again not happy with their income, because the research say that 32% remain underemployed and 11% remain unemployed. So I mean, it's a huge, it's almost half of the people who actually try to find a new livelihood because of the climate change issues at their own locality. They have not enough income to survive, and that's why migration come as a third strategy as a last option, I would say last option for the people to survive and find the livelihood and survive. So in that context, yes, I understand.
Last 2 minutes.
I understand. So if you look at this, diagram, actually we try to understand, try to show you that how the decreasing of farming and fishing and other local opportunities, agricultural based opportunities and off farm activities, how the people actually try to cope with the strategy and then what they do, and how the out migration actually come as a strategy to find a new livelihood. Our finding says that 70% household in that area have at least one migrant member, and then 82% household have at least one member who migrated during 2000 and 2017, which is very much significant that the frequency, the intensity of the climate related hazards actually forced people to migrate more during the last 2 decades than the before. And then data shows that 85% households took part in seasonal migration more than once time, so which is also significant to understand. And among the households who migrate, 96% internally migrate, and 4% actually take part international and cross-border migration. And the next slide is again to understand how the migration becomes a cycle of the people of the region to find better livelihood. And 85% actually remigration happens in different contexts that actually we try to show here. And that the findings says that 31% return in 31% migrants, I mean the migrants, internally migrant workers, they return immediately after finishing seasonal work. 30% does not return until and unless they earn a certain amount for meeting their own needs. And 32% actually forced to return because of risks and vulnerabilities in the place of destination. Just a brief glimpse on gender-specific issues. We found that 10% women migrate with their husbands, and 4% women migrate with the full family. And the migration of women in this context has a critical impact, especially on their children or on themselves as well. Because the women, they face harassment at the workplace, they face gender-based violence during their migration journey, and the impact of left behind children has critical consequences. What we have identified. First one is there's a huge school drop among the children because of migration of their parents. There is a increase in early marriage because very often the parents feel insecure if they have adolescent girls, so they actually try to arrange marriage for them, to make sure the security in their sense, and then the increase of child labor of the parents also increased in this context. And the next slide is basically recommendations. And if I say that yes, there is a huge gap in terms of the policy, particularly at national level policy to address internal migration. But the good news is that the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100 actually acknowledges the pressure of internal migration due to disasters and climate hazards, but there is no action plan yet. So that is much more significant to us, that because we all know about the our ambition about Bangladesh Delta Plan. So the internal migration is addressed there, but there is no action plan. So we actually recommend that the government of Bangladesh must develop a concrete action plan to address climate change and migration nexus. The second one is, under the policy interventions, we think that there is urgent need for institutional arrangement and regulations, as well as support programs responding to the needs of internal climate migration. So, which is very much important at this moment. And in terms of the, international migration, it is really important for Bangladesh government to raise these issues at different international and global forum, and do advocacy to make a common understanding in relation to migration and climate change, because there is still debate about the link between migration and climate change. So that's why, as Bangladesh is vulnerable to climate change, and there is a huge migration context in Bangladesh. So Bangladesh government should take up this issue in different international and global fora. And in terms of sending labor migrant workers to different destination countries, the government should sign special MOU bilateral agreements with the countries of destination in line with the international frameworks, particularly the Global Compact on Migration, which is now very significant in the global migration context. The second one is that the government needs to negotiate compensation schemes with polluter countries under the mechanism of loss and damage. And the next one is the government should initiate foreign and domestic investments towards migration and adaptation programs for climate affected communities, and including including migrant workers. The last one, we actually found a huge gap in terms of skills and vocational trainings for the youth people in that region. There is no actually market-oriented skills and vocational training. So that's why we actually propose that the government should bring market-oriented skills and vocational trainings into the coastal belt, and the government should evaluate potential of remote jobs in the IT industry and related training, so that the people are skilled and find alternative livelihood opportunities to build resilience in climate change context. So that's all I think from my side, but I'm open to respond to the questions you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shakirul, for your presentation. We went slightly over time, but I think that's okay. We'll somehow make up for it. And I think the research and the presentation was very interesting. What I caught was that there were a couple of impacts of the climate change on these communities, and one of the major ones was salination, the salination of soils, and reducing a decline in agriculture as a result, and impacting the entire livelihood. And people then having basically three options, or as they see it, okay, they go back to what they know, their normal livelihoods, but they don't manage very much. Or they look for alternative livelihoods, also difficult. Or, and then as a last option, they go for migration. And then you mentioned both internal and external migration, where again, there's different options. There's people who go for seasonal migration, they then return. There's people who don't return, and there's people who have to return. They're forced to return because somehow it didn't work out. So many different scenarios here in terms of what they can and try to do to cope with this changing circumstances, which impacts, I mean, we can see the numbers now, it's quite drastic how it impacts communities' livelihoods. Also negative impacts such as what you mentioned, the social impacts, early marriage and school dropout, child labor, health issues, and so on. And then some of the recommendations know that we need a bit of an action plan. It's very good that it's recognized that this is happening in the Delta plan, for instance, but that a bit more concrete actions are needed. You mentioned things like we need programs to support these communities. We need to raise a better awareness also at global level about these links between migration and climate change. I think this research shows very clearly there is a link. And yeah, you also mentioned compensation schemes, that might be an opportunity for the government to go for these compensation schemes. For me, clearly this research shows this clear link and how there are different options. The communities are trying to cope, and the impact it has, on these communities. And I would like to now go to the first panelist, Professor Atiq Rahman. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd be very interested to know from you, looking at the research, how is internal migration currently addressed within the existing policies in Bangladesh? Surely there must be. Bangladesh is very, very on top of climate change and has this, quite a number of policies, has recognized this link. So how do you see that within the existing policies, and what are then somehow the ways we can help and support the government to improve them, perhaps to come up with such an action plans as suggested by Shakirul? Yeah, so just a few questions to you, Professor Atiq. Thank you very much for your reflection.
Thank you, Celestine. Great pleasure to be here. The 5 minutes that I have in my hand, what I will try and do is to raise 5 quick points. I hope they'll be sharp, but I hope they'll be clear as well. The first point is that what we are talking about is climate-induced forced migration. There is a huge amount of voluntary migration that is going on. The present civilization of the planet, whether it's the United States, Canada, Australia, UK, parts of Europe, even South Asia, is based on migration. So migration is a global phenomenon and has many positive impacts, some negative impacts. But what we are talking about is climate-induced forced migration. You have no choice. People, the second point is, well, part of the first point is that people do not want to migrate. They're forced to migrate in this situation because the climate extremes, through its extreme events, whether it's flood, cyclone, as has been showed in the study, it's increased salinity, it doesn't make them possible to contain their life. They try to adapt from simple getting food, safe water, to all the other ways, housing and shelter and good quality of life, education for their children, everything. They want to adapt. They want to develop. They want to enter the process of sustainable development. And in the process, they find it very, very difficult. So either the whole family or part of the family has to leave to get some, eke out some living, or it becomes impossible to stay in an area because of cyclones, flood, increased salinity, and many other factors that have been mentioned. The second point is that migration, really, our objective is to adapt under climate conditions. Migration is the failure of adaptation. So it's the limit of adaptation after which adaptation has failed. You cannot adapt anymore under those circumstances. Some people use it as a coping strategy. Some people call it as an adaptation strategy. I would say this is the beyond adaptation, end of adaptation and out. So other systems become very, very difficult. And there are a lot of studies that we have done and studied. Incidentally, we, Bangladesh Center for Advanced Studies, had evaluated this Paniyo Jivan project, and we found it quite interesting, quite deep, and pretty well done, and quite a bit of learning from one site, one area in the coastal area. We have done a similar study in Prakash, the British Council, and UK with a large number of partners, ECAD, the C3ER, and others, where we have shown, Ramru, where we have shown that migration is going on in a very big way. It is a response to climate change, extreme events and impact, and people are moving, and most of them are trying to eke out a living, and it is quite huge. It's all over. We have studied in coastal area, in drought-prone area, in floodplains of the North Deepest Basin called Howard Basin. We have done also in the hill tracts area, but we have seen everywhere migration is there. In terms of planning, well, the national strategy, there isn't one on migration per se, but there are attempts within the system to incorporate those. That doesn't work. There has to be a dedicated migration strategy and action plan that we have not done. We have done the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy Action Plan, under which we have considered some issues of migration, and there is a revision of that going on, but it will not have the required impetus and the importance that is there. There is a new understanding that we learned from our study, which is very critical and very deep in understanding. One man understand. Where is that we have to focus? Now, there are two situations of a migrant. First, it's called the source of migration. Why am I living someplace? Why am I going away? What are the stresses? What happens? That's the one part. Second is where I am going. How have I decided this? This is pretty much random decision. You have a cousin, you know somebody, you jump in there, hope there will be work. Life doesn't work that simply. It has to be structured, organized, and where we go is what we call the destination. And what we are proposing now is that there has to be serious linkage between source and destination, and we, organizers, planners, helping the government, helping local systems of local government to analyze what are the likelihoods of climate change impact coming, what are the likelihood of people who have to migrate, and how can we match the source of migration to the destination of migration so that it becomes manageable, workable, and it becomes part of a plan. Now, as you might know, government of Bangladesh is creating 100 economic zones across the country. These are opportunities where we can use the migrants to go and do certain types of labor. But just being unskilled labor doesn't help. So we have to develop the skill in the place of source so that skill development becomes one of the key issues, one of the points that has been made in the study as well. In the Panyojivan study also, the point has been made. And my last point is on that to do, mostly they go from rural areas to semi-urban, urban areas. So the resilience that is required to build is both in the rural areas and urban areas. So rural, urban is a continuum in Bangladesh. That resilience has to be built, understood, processes, and encourage the transfer in a systematic way. So that would be the one. One out of this project, Helvetas project, one of the lessons or possibilities that we have is we have excellent experts that is working on the project from the Switzerland side. We have good teams now that we have also become part of the system of Helvetas through this evaluation process, ECAT and others. So what I think is an opportunity that we start a bilateral process of deep thinking, research, formulation, and take a larger project in terms of doing this collaboration in a very systematic way in deeper research and understanding. I would be happy to participate in that sort of system. So that give us a way forward to move on. I don't want to take too much time. I think I've used my time. But let me just tell you that there are, through the bad lessons, there is always a silver lining. And here the silver lining is the collaboration between Helvetas, BCS, ICAT, others, and take it deeper, further. It's just not one point, it's several, and it has to be systemic. So we can influence the government, we can encourage the government. Our experience is Bangladesh government is very cooperative, participatory, interested, and one of the ways, because we are helping the government with sustainable development, one of the ways is to ensure better life, better living, better opportunities for these migrants. Let's remember, migrants are the pioneers. They're the adventurers of the system. So there is an inherent quality in them that we must be able to take up and use it. But we have to develop the skills, we have to match it up, we have to take it forward further and make it part of the integrated process of developing and reducing the stress of climate change. And that is the best way to address climate change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Atiq. Thank you also very much for pointing out to us this rural-urban linkages. Huh? I think that that is an interesting and relevant aspect. And I would like to actually quickly also go to Professor Vally. Professor, I think you mentioned this global perspective as well. I mean, migration happens globally. Professor Vally, could you maybe help us to reflect a bit on this more global perspective and any intakes for Bangladesh?
Yeah, thank you again for the invitation. There are two things here. Most environmental migration is internal. As so far, this has been the case. Perhaps in the future, environmental migration could lead to international migration or be characterized as such, but we should not, see this as being the case right now. And I think that the report or the presentation of Shakirul show that only 4 households migrated internationally. The rest of them move internally, and it was indeed the case. They moved from rural areas mostly to the urban areas. Also, I would like to comment on the presentation for the minute, because I think the work that's been done by the Helvetas group, it's very informative. It collaborates findings of existing research regarding that the climate change is an important driver of migration, and that the migration is internal, and that the women, which is women who stay behind, they are become much more vulnerable. But also, I would have liked to see whether there are instances where when male household members' migration leads also to increasing women's economic freedom, decision capacity, and also enhance their agency, because that is going to be very important in the future if that continues to be the case for some type of sustainable development. Now, I'm coming back to what you said about what the international community should do and the like. Definitely, there is a congruence between climatic changes and changes in the demographics of the countries. For example, in the less developed countries, you have rapidly growing youthful populations, where in the developed countries, you do have some aging, slow-growing populations. What does this mean? That means that there must be some kind of coordinated national and international strategies that integrate migration considerations with a wider adaptation and sustainable development policies. Already we heard from Shakirul that the Global Compact of Safe and Orderly and Regular Migration make this kind of recommendations, and in particular, the objective 2 of the compact aims at reducing drivers of involuntary or low agency migration, and recommends that states establish systems for sharing information on environmental migration, develop climate adaptation and resilience strategies, harmonized at the sub-regional and regional levels, and of course, coordinate on disaster risk prevention and responses. What does this imply? Politics, This brings us, to what extent both national governments and as a result, of course, international collaboration or international organizations would be willing and able to promote legal aspects regarding migration across the borders between countries, because as we know so far, environmental migrants, international environmental migrants are not eligible for asylum status, for example, right? So national coordinate, individual nations, they need to integrate mobility into this kind of wider adaptation plans, and such, I think, this kind of recommendation I just made, right, pretty much dovetails strongly with the objectives of the Compact on Migration, but also with the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction and the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. You had also another question, Celestine, right?
Yes, how can this research contribute to a global platform, not a global discourse that's happening? Would be another question.
Bangladesh, how it can do that? I mean, by itself, I mean, becoming member, contribute in any way in convincing other states, in seeing the issue. But I don't believe that individual states could really make a difference at the international level. A strong collaboration is needed. And a belief that climatic changes could increase migration among not only internally, but also internationally at some point.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Vally, for your inputs and comments. I think collaboration is also something that Professor Atiq mentioned, that the positive thing that comes out of this is that we have this opportunity to collaborate. Yeah, as you also mentioned, this is also about politics and political choices. It's something also I realized when I was reading the article. I would actually like to hear from Dr. Mokhlesur. How do you see this? How do you see this internal migration dynamics in terms of locally led adaptation, or perhaps it goes beyond adaptation, as Professor Atiq was mentioning, and the anticipated future? I mean, how do you see that the future of this? Will it be, or should political choice be that we then focus on safe migration or better migration with skilled labor and so on? Or should it be that we, the Bangladesh government should invest more in those areas in terms of infrastructure, in terms of saline resistant agriculture perhaps, or how do you see this? That would be interesting to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much. Just a second. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hello. Yeah. First of all, I just like to make some comments on the presentation itself or the research itself. And I believe that it's a good piece of work, and the data was collected from the baseline and endline thing, and it's a blend of qualitative and quantitative. However, I just like to say that, I mean, there are many contextual factors. I mean, if you consider the climate-induced factors that influence people to migrate, whether internally or externally, basically it is internal and cyclical. But what are the contextual factors which are not essentially linked to the climate change, but like weak governance, particularly water governance, natural resource governance, exclusion of poor from different benefits, knowledges, technologies, inputs. There are also loss of CPRs, I mean, the common pool resources, lack of access by the poor to the open water fisheries or forest resources. So these are actually important factors that also influence people to migrate. And it's very critical and very difficult maybe to divide that well. I mean, what are the main causes is it really due to the climate-induced factors or non-climate? So we need to know that first and very clearly. And there are also overlapping things that the climate and non-climate, maybe they're together influencing people to migrate. So that should be clear. Because what Dr. Atiq said, that migration is historical, and it was there in the coastal areas and in other areas. particularly in Shakira area where we have many works that, I mean, even in Khulla, Koira areas, that historically people migrate during the rice harvesting season. At that time, there is less job opportunity in their area, so they migrate and harvest rice, get money, and also share of the rice. And with that rice, they can manage their family for 2, 3, 4 months. So this is a kind of historical practice. And definitely there are climate-related factors that actually influence people to migrate. And other thing is, there are lots of opportunities. I mean, lots of constructions, industries, lots of development works and need huge, laborers. So the people have multiple opportunities to migrate and earn more money. So we need to look at the overall framework of migration, the overall landscape that, the why people migrate, and what are the factors. And I think there are occupational, I mean, what sort of people they migrate? I mean, the farmers, the landless wage laborers, who are the migrants? We also need to understand that not only the economic, I mean, the economic capacity or the financial aspects, but also the occupational pattern. Good that we know that the women migrate as well, a certain percentage with husband and also with their families. But there are also lots of migration of children. I mean, the people aged, below 18, particularly in some risky trades like brick kilns and automobiles, factories, industries, etc., garages. So we need to know the different aspects of migration and also people where they work, types of works and engagement of people there. I think all these are in the study, but because of the time constraint, it was not presented. Regarding the late adaptation, but historically migration was there. So do the people really decide that, well, due to climate change, we need to migrate now? And they make a plan for a kind of planned migration? I don't think so. It is basically historical. So maybe we can say that it is, they cope the crisis period through migration. And I don't think there is any kind of incentives or any programs or any support systems locally at the union Parish, the local union council or sub-district or district level to address the migration issues. So it is completely voluntary, and then people they decide when to migrate, where to migrate, how to migrate, and all these things. So I am not sure that whether it is a locally led and well planned, whether they have any future planning for the systematic migrations. This and that is still not very clear, also far I understand. And the study, I think, definitely has a merit, but what is the practical use of it is a big question, because many years back, CEGIS also conducted one study on displacement and migration with support of the UNDP assisted CDMP project. But we didn't see any progress, any follow-up actions on the findings of that study. But I guess these are important things, and definitely it helps people living at the front line of climate change to manage or to adjust to the crisis caused due to climate and non-climatic factors. But it needs some form of support and patronization from the government systems. And what Atiq Bhai said is, the skill building, which is very important, and we have ample opportunities within country for absorbing many seasonally migrant people, and also we have potential to send them abroad to make their living and also good for the country. I would also like to see the difference between what happened due to the project interventions from the baseline to endline quantitative data collection. I hope the researchers that have this information would be good if it is shared. And more on the the effects of migration, the positive income, livelihoods, knowledge, skills, they can inject in their own areas, but at the same time, there are also lots of sufferings. So how this can be mitigated, and how can we have a better migration strategy, which is well supported, well planned, and safety and securities are embedded in it. So I look forward to have that sort of planned migration in future. I think I should end here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your insights and for your critical question regarding what use will this study have in the practical, no? And then with that, actually, I would like to ask Nicole to come in with your reflections and maybe also answer some of the points that were raised. Huh? Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Celestine, in particular for the challenging questions bringing up to me. Also being the last speakers, it's definitely challenging to somehow bring something which has not already been highlighted. But as I have been involved myself in the study, as Shakir also said, for me, there are 3 elements I would particularly like first to highlight. I mean, the action research clearly shows that climate change acts as a threat multiplier in an already vulnerable area. And it brings a new dimension in the migration discussion, in the migration dynamic. This increase in intensity and frequency of climate event has led to constant coping, so rendering the efforts of building back better and developing adaptation strategies to an ever-increasing survival struggle. So migration is then one option, often a forced one, as also said before by Professor Atiq. And I think there is an important but. I mean, what the study clearly has shows, and it's in line with previous studies, is that people trying to stay in their ancestral communities, they try to adapt as much as possible, and to adapt to the extent they are able to adapt. And I think this action research has clearly shown that many farmers have even incorporated climate resilient practices to build up local resilience. So communities really prefer to stay at the location as much as possible before they are moving or before they are forced to move. And I think this brings us to the key topic of the conference, how important actually these locally led adaptation actions are, and the role NGOs like Helvetas with its implementing partners play in the whole discussion about migration in the context of climate change. When we know that people only leave as a last option, then I think it's important to facilitate and support them in adapting to the local circumstances. But this then requires a whole set of different issues which we need to consider. And we have also seen in the Panitiban project how important they are. I just mentioned 2 elements. Like the local service providers. Now, when we talk about locally led adaptation activities, it is important to link the communities to such local service providers, because it can make that we can create a local market, we can make that these locally led adaptation practices become sustainable, and last, households can then sell their products, and it contributes to an increased additional income at the household level. This is one entry point or perspective we need to consider in the whole discussion. But then we do not only need to support the local communities, we also need to support the local government institutions to build up their capacities in risk and climate awareness, support them then in the budget process to ensure that climate resilient activities are supported at the PRISILA level based on risk reduction action plans, which reflect the community's need. So I think there are many elements we can support to strengthen locally led adaptation activities so that then migration only becomes as a last forced option. A second point I would like to highlight, the action research has shown that the migration has become more frequent, long, further in distance, and repetitive during the last 2 decades, which can partially be attributed to the environmental changes, to climate change. Now, when we look in more details about the migration dynamics, and I think that was one point which was not as strongly highlighted by Shakirul, is that we could observe that in particular poorly educated respondents migrate more frequently. And I think that's an important entry point for Helvetas in the future. Panijibon is just starting its next phase. So this action research just arrived at the right time. So the new phase will give particular attention to this group of poorly educated respondents who migrate more frequently. This then, so in addition to locally led adaptation activities, offering skills development opportunities for these social groups, then especially also for women and youth, will become key. And I mean, this offering of skills development opportunities has now been highlighted by many panelists. So I think besides having locally led adaptation activities, I think there is an important element to further develop and promote. But what we also figured out, and it became quite obvious, is that when we work on the ground, this nexus on climate and migration is often not yet clearly reflected on local area-based discussions, where we would really better explain on the ground about this nexus, raise awareness, so that also vulnerable communities have a better understanding on the impacts of climate change, and then explore jointly with them possible livelihood diversification and raising awareness about possible future options for them. And this cannot be a general decision, but that is very individual from household to households. In this context, we also will pay particular attention to providing ideas and options to families who have a member who migrates. So in the use of remittances, that they better make use of remittances, for instance, for climate resilient economic livelihood activities. Because remittances are important, but we can also support migrant families in making maybe better or more selective choices in the use of remittances. Now going back to Celestine's question about Helvetas' strategy to work on the recommendation from the research, I think phase 3 now of Panijibon is just the right moment, because a particular focus will be on advocacy and bring the issue and challenges reflected on the ground now up to subnational and to the national level, and then also ideally to the global level. So what helped us to get the results of the action research was actually to formulate these observations into concrete actions on the ground. And I think that's somehow the crucial condition step that we can really respond to these needs directly on the ground. And then in a second step, take this information, these lessons learned, which we have on the ground, up to the national level. And here I see the role of Helvetas, including its implementing partner. We have very important implementing partner who play a key role at the advocacy level in Bangladesh, who can then really bring up the issue on the migration climate nexus to the national level. We all know that although millions of people already are suffering from the impact, but the government of Bangladesh has not legally recognized climate vulnerable communities, as Shakirul presented at the end of his presentation. So I think there we can really then play jointly with the implementing partner an important role for advocacy at the different levels. And maybe just to close, I mean, it is right, as has been pinpointed just by the professor before, that, I mean, there are still many lacks. And what is really then the tipping point that people finally leave? This, of course, is still a challenge we would need to address in this upcoming phase. So what is then really the decision that people leave? What are the possible incentives? And I think that would be definitely interesting issues to look further at it. But what we will definitely do, as we have heard, I mean, so far we have mainly to do with the internal migration. And this gives us the opportunity to better understand this migration dynamic, as it is internal and it's easier actually also to monitor. So in phase 3 of Panitibon, we want really to support the establishment of a gender segregated database for seasonal temporary migrants, which will be established at the union level. So to raise, first of all, awareness about the migration dynamics, but also to have then better response mechanism in place in Bangladesh, as we have a better understanding about the migration dynamic. And of course, the migrants would be better protected and we can support them better. And just a very last closing remark from our side. I mean, Helvetas, jointly with other Swiss partners, have at the moment a mandate by the humanitarian aid of SDC, the Swiss Agency for Development, to really look at concrete cases on the ground and better and come up with a compendium of case studies on migration in the context of climate change. So jointly with this work and our inside experience now of Bangladesh, we will definitely then use the opportunity also to bring that up to the global level and contribute to more appropriate and more straightforward regulations and policies. And with this, I would like to hand over to Celestine.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. That was quite a comprehensive response, I think, to some of the things that we plan and would like to try out now in response to the study, that we would like to take those findings into consideration for the next phase. Hopefully also respond a little bit to Dr. Mokhlesur's question and to some of the questions in the chat. Actually, on this note, I would like to ask Dr. Salim Hook, who is here with us, to also give a response. He is director of ECAT, as everybody knows, I think, and he has been a part of Panitibon. So I'm very interested to hear from Dr. Hook if he has any insights for us to share. If he's around. I see he's around. Dr. Salim? No, it doesn't seem he...
Yeah, we can see him, but probably he can listen. So I think we can call later again. Eh?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's difficult to summarize this very interesting discussion. I think a couple of things were mentioned, some critical points as well, some very good comments with regards to the nexus of climate change and migration, whether this is now actually adaptation or goes beyond adaptation. The idea that actually migration already happened already in history. So how far is it now related to climate change? Then your reaction, yes, but this is now climate change is the additional threat that vulnerable communities face, apart from their other contextual factors. As Dr. Mokhlesur also mentioned, there are other contextual factors, but I would agree with you, Nicole, that this is now an additional threat that they have to cope with. There were also questions about, well, this leaves behind women in a more vulnerable position, but could this be turned around, or is that indeed the case? Could it also be that, in fact, now they have to make the decisions? Can they also become more empowered in this decision making? This came from Professor Vally, which also relates to some of the questions in the chat box. So, in fact, I would actually like to go to the questions in the chat box. And maybe, you know, I would invite then the panelists to respond if they feel that they have something to share in this topic. I saw there was a question on this gender, like how can we actually, here, question from Kazi Absule. What sorts of vulnerabilities women comparatively face more than their counterparts due to climate change, frequent disasters, and what type of special coping mechanisms can be adopted in gender-sensitive ways? So I would like to invite one of the panelists to respond to this question.
Celestine, actually, I am actually trying my best to respond to the questions in writing in the box. Yes, maybe I missed out the first question by Kaji Abu Saleh. What was that? I just what was the question? I think
basically it's about
what sorts of vulnerabilities women comparatively face more than their counterpart due to climate change and frequent disasters, and what type of special coping mechanisms can be adopted in gender-sensitive ways?
I mean, in terms of vulnerability compared to their male counterpart, yes, definitely. You know, our research found that the women usually face gender-based violence both in the workplace if they migrate or if they remain at home because the husband, the guardian are not present at home. So this is a very often case that we found, particularly the women migrant workers who work in the brick lane and other places. So yes, as most of the cases that women migrate with in different districts in Bangladesh. So again, the cultural context, the gender-based violence are much more prevalent. But we actually did not much more focus on this kind of analysis because our focus was actually to try to understand how the climate change hazards actually impact on livelihoods and then it actually forced people to migrate. So that is the one thing. I just forgot the second one. Maybe our research didn't focus on that. So if there is any questions left, I mean, yeah, there are some, that I'm still trying to respond by writing. So if there is any further questions, please let us know. And then and I will also request the panelists.
May I come in to comment on the women issues in
yes.
Gender perspective?
Please, sir.
Yes,
please.
This is quite well established now in Bangladesh, in the coastal area and all other areas, that women are in triple bind. They are on migration. They have two problems. When their partners, their members of the family migrate, that load of the men that they used to carry comes on the family management and creating the food and the safe drinking water and all that back to the women who are left. So they are doubly bound. On the other hand, the children who are going to schools cannot often go to schools because the male support isn't there, and sometimes they have to take boats to go across, and that is not possible, and the men are not there, the parents, and that has. On the case of if they migrate at all, they're in a doubly different cultural system. Village to village culture differs as much as union to union, area to area. So that whole culture, the words, the food habits, everything differ every 3 kilometers in Bangladesh, or even shorter than that, kilometer by kilometer. So that whole alienation and resettlement with no resources or very limited resources creates a big problem. Hence, the skill development has to include the women's skill as well prior to migration. So over a period of time, what we have to do is take adaptation resources and possibilities and opportunities to be extended and go beyond adaptation into migration, so that when the migration is forced upon someone, it is slightly easier. It's not going to be the easiest, it's slightly easier. And then they have to be able to transit. And there has to be government policy now. We are working with the government. Government is sensitive. They're willing to do this, but it's a very different occasion and system. With the rapid economic growth, the opportunities will come at certain points, but it is only the skilled labor who will get the highest opportunity access. So this is true for women as well as men. And children are equally vulnerable or even more vulnerable after migration of a family partner. But women children, girl children are even more vulnerable. So the whole vulnerability enhances in 3 different layers when migration starts taking place. Obviously, the fact that one is migrating has already depressed the economic opportunities of those people in the place where they are. So, and load of women has increased. Then on the transition, that liability and the resource decrease, all that add up. So let me stop there on that point. If there are other points, I'm happy to respond.
Professor Vally, would you like to respond? Please unmute your mic.
So sorry. I was looking at the chat and I saw a question regarding to what extent environmental change is a driver of migration. May I answer this?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. It's not easy. We know that people migrate because of economic reasons, social reasons, political reasons, demographic. Although demographic always goes along with economic reasons, and then you have the environmental reasons. You cannot really identify a very small percentage of migrants could be purely characterized as environmental migrants. We know that, if a tsunami hits, or not, a storm, during the monsoon, you do have high tides in Bangladesh around the river basin. In that case, people will move. They have to, in order to save their lives, they have to flee. But usually this type of migration, it is short-lived. People will migrate close by and also for a small period of time. So yes, for sudden onset events, we can identify people that they had to move from their homes. Turning now to the long-term environmental events like salinity, soil, water, droughts and the like, that it's not easy. People usually, because we know that there is this idea of a place attachment because of cultural reasons, because of many other reasons. People would like to stay. So they will exhaust all their options, resources, staying in the place, and only when life becomes unbearable, then they will move. But at this point, these people are not considered to be environmental migrants. They are economic migrants. And I believe that in the future, although people might have been initially forced to leave their rural areas to go to the urban, at the point where they will migrate from the urban centers of one country to another country, that it will not be considered environmental migration. It will consider economic migration. And this brings us back to what I talked earlier about this global governance, how countries could come along and see to what extent, or trying to tease out to what extent the environment was a major reason behind migration, and then accordingly regulate or reach some type of agreements, or at least give status to environmental migrants, legal status. Environmental migrants, international environmental migrants do not have a legal status right now. So they cannot apply for an asylum, say in the European Union or somewhere else. They will be treated as economic migrants, social migrants, and the like. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Professor Vally, also for bringing in the global governance aspect.
Can I just come in to respond to Dr. Vally? The environmental migrant that you mentioned is extremely valid and absolutely legitimate, but the climate-induced migration is a special case of environmental migration. Climate change is a global phenomenon induced by the greatest emitters. So it has a global connection to the phenomenon of displacement, to the phenomenon of climate change, which is the root of displacement. So there is a secondary linkage, if you want to call it that, but there is a linkage there. But you are absolutely right, environmental migration is not yet accepted. It's a purely pollution-based migration. Pollution of water may have a climate cause, may not have a climate cause. Industrial pollution, for example, in Dhaka city, all the 4 rivers are totally polluted. And yet that has a migratory, doesn't have the migration, but is environmental as such. So
the problem is,
let me just finish one sentence and I'll hand it over to you. So it is a true case that what we are talking about, climate-induced migration, is a special case of environmental migration. Global environmental migration is a different one. Go ahead, sorry.
Exactly. I mean, we don't have a universally accepted definition.
Exactly.
So there is climate migrant, climate refugee, environmental migrant, and the like. So just to be consistent, right now I tend to use the definition of the IOM, which is environmental migrant, and it's a person who was forced to leave its original location because of some type of environmental reason, be pollution, be drought, be any of those. It's much more comprehensive. But because we're talking about climate change right now, I mean, for me, environmental migration here, it's climate migration. But this is not a legally or broadly accepted definition.
Sure.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I think there are maybe other questions as well, so I would like to give the floor to the participants. If they would like to ask a question, please raise your hand, and you can ask any of the panelists your question. So if you could please raise your hand if you know how to do that.
And Celestine, Dr. Hawk has left us because of another session, but Dr. Mizan is here. So we'd please invite him to provide his thoughts in the discussion as well.
Okay.
Professor Mizan, welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I have got to hear all these deliberations and the designated discussions. I have also brought out a few very important points. As a climate negotiator with the Bangladesh delegation for the last 20 years, I will focus a little on international aspect of migration, which Professor Vally has referred to. In fact, if you see Article para 14F of the Cancun framework that we had, now we have retreated much back. Despite the fact that we have now the TFD and their recommendations, including a dedicated financial mechanism, we are not having much progress in terms of any kind of specific policy. We have clauses or activities to better understand, research, and plan. And planned relocation does not refer to internal relocation. If you look at the submissions of the NDCs, I can share the number. Out of 184 NDCs, 33 NDCs have referred to planned relocation somewhere or the other. Half of them have referred to planned relocation, but I will mention a little idea about this planned relocation abroad. Dr. Atiq has mentioned about migration as an adaptation failure. Absolutely. But also adaptation is again, migration is again an adaptation strategy. And in terms of planned relocation abroad, Professor Vally has referred to about some slow population growth. I will argue that many countries in Europe have got negative population growth rate. So this means that over time, absolute population will go down over the years. So whatever rhetorics you have politically in terms of anti-migration, you will need labor force. And I can unequivocally say that no literature, not a single literature on migration abroad has got negative connotations. Unequivocally, they are positive. I have gone through the World Bank literature of OECD literature. Everywhere, migrants had a positive impacts on labor productivity in the host countries, on revenue, public revenue, as well as GDP growth. So my submission is, Dr. Atiq mentioned about capacity building. So since many countries have negative population growth rate, so let us have deals between bilaterally or multilaterally, that those countries needing labor force should come to an agreement that the labor supply countries will have a specific training for the climate displaces, and based on the demands of industrial countries, they can be supplied. And these state-of-the-art training institutions can be supported by the donor money. Then we have a win-win options on both sides, because international migration will happen, and you have to, the developed countries have to accept that. And you look at the response of Finland and Sweden. They had a very liberal migration policy, but after 2015, 2016, migration from Syria and Arab countries, they have now stopped. And the European Union doesn't have a unified policy on migration. So, and also another instrument can be used as Spain does with Colombia. For example, circular migration, temporary migration. that the specific number of specified skilled people come, they work for 3 or 5 years and then go back. This is good both for the host countries as well as for the countries of origin. So as Professor Vally has mentioned, I absolutely agree with her. We need to have kind of a planned relocation abroad, you know, and for that we need to have collaboration, and article para 14F has got this collaboration and coordination very specifically in that para. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mizan, and for pointing out that we need also somehow a structured response to migration, since that is what is happening and is also has positive impacts. Huh? Just to summarize very shortly your very good input. I would actually like to give the opportunity to 2 participants who've raised their hand. I see here Silvana Israt. You raised your hand. Would you like to ask your question? You will need to unmute.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Can I go on?
Yes, who is this?
This is JV, Jagannath Venkatramaya.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Mine is a very short question. Somehow the word refugee doesn't go well in the climate action, especially. If you take disaster since 1900 till date, which is being monitored on a weekly basis, here is a case, Bangladesh, for example, where communities living through and looking at various formalities and regulations, not accepting the climate change as a disaster will be doing injustice. We have to consider climate change as also in par with any natural or technological disaster. This has to be done at an international level. As rightly pointed out by my learned, responder in the last moment, for 2 decades he is finding so much of a positive development in international context. Shouldn't we go a little bit ahead in a proactive way? This is my question, please. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure who would like to answer that question. Whoever feels like they can answer, maybe.
I can talk about the refugee part.
Okay, thank you.
The word refugee is politically not only sensitive, it's a legal term. The moment you say refugee, you have to give a certain status to the refugee with all the human rights and obligations that the respective country has. So, and it has a continuity. A refugee cannot be thrown out that easily. So there are a whole set of issues where the word refugee becomes very sensitive. So it's, as I said, it's a political and a legal term. So one has to be sensitive about it. On the other hand, migrant, and the most wider term is locally displaced persons or internally displaced person. That's where the greatest emphasis of climate-induced migration is. Other migrations, economic migration is very much global, and a lot of it is happening. You know, Bangladesh has about more than 10 million people abroad working and sending. One of the biggest income for Bangladesh is the resources that the migrant population send. That is a different phenomenon and is positive, increasing and creating development. Migration, forced climate-induced migration is a forced migration, and the linkage with climate change induced extreme events has to be shown. Otherwise, that doesn't happen. So that is the separation, and refugee is a separate connotation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I would like to go to Silvana, who raised her hand, but and I see her, but Silvana, can you hear us and can you unmute? Okay. In that case, Shakirul, I don't know if you want to maybe respond to, because you, as OKUP, you're quite an expert on migration. Do you want to respond to any of these last questions?
Yeah, I completely agree with the comments given by Dr. Atiq. He is absolutely right that the refugees has because we have refugee convention in 1951 or 52, and then it is many of the countries in the world have already adopted it. So that's why the refugees have a certain category of rights in all the destination countries, and it is also right that the economic migrant workers, it's globally accepted that that the people actually migrate for economic reasons. So it is not only that not only the issue of the countries of origin, but it is also important from the context of countries of destination, because the countries of destination need human resources in their country to move their economic activities. So that's why it's it's beneficial for both the countries of origin and destination, vice versa. And that's why there is a global there are many global conventions and compacts on that, especially to establish the rights and protection of the migrant workers throughout the migration cycle. But again, when we talk about the migration because of climate change hazards, still it is not accepted. There is a huge debate, particularly in the countries who are somehow responsible to to create climate related events. I mean, to contribute to increase the carbon and then causes this kind of issues. So that's why actually even it was said that yes, the European countries are not in a position to accept the people who are who migrate because of climate related events. And we have seen the news in Italy and some other countries in Europe, how they react on the people on move. So but I really go with the comments by Dr. Vally. She rightly pointed out that the link between the migration, forced migration because of climate-induced reason. But I will say that this, I mean, the issue is now in the discussion at national level and also at global level, and that's why one of our recommendations was that we need a collective voice actually at national level and international level to raise these issues, that the countries should recognize that the people are forced to migrate because of the climate related hazards. So we really need a collective voice at all level, and then actually yes, once it is recognized, then I think the countries will take initiatives, programs, action plans to address the issues of climate-induced migrant workers. But it's really a good start, I think, to bring these issues up at all levels for a strong advocacy. And I'm really happy to have the experienced and skilled, I mean, my predecessors, the professors, doctors. So I think it's a good strength of all of us to move forward with this issue to be accepted and recognized at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakirul, for your inputs there. We are coming a bit to a close, but there's one more pending question that also from my side, I'm very curious still to hear a little bit more about what can we recommend to the government. We in the beginning said, well, there are some policies like, okay, there's a Delta plan, but then action plan is missing. So, and then you do have some concrete recommendations also in your presentation, but also from others. You know, what you know, when you listen to this discussion, when you look at the research, what would be sort of the policy recommendations that we could make to the government? So anyone can respond to this. Yes, Professor.
Okay, I'll take a shot. Others can join in. The time is short. One of the first thing is to recognize that this is the forced displacement caused by externality, no control of the person who is being displaced to stop climate change. That can only be done by all the countries put together, particularly the emitting countries, greenhouse gas emitting countries. So it's a much more global phenomenon. So a mechanism from the government side has to be to help encourage internal displaced migration, and as I said earlier, to ensure skill development from the source over a period of time to the destination, where again absorption capacity has to be built, institutions have to be built, capacity has to be built, facilitators has to be linked up, there has to be first legal positions, then institutional positions, then intermediaries such as NGOs, civil society actors who can do this linking and increase the capacity. This has to be consistent with the national plan. In Bangladesh, there is 5-year plan. We are now in the 8th 5-year plan, and they are considering it, but not as strongly as we are talking here. But that is integral part. Then we have a longer term plan, you know, up to 2100, which are composite of various 5-year plans. Every 5 years it has to be reviewed. We have the strategy action plan on climate change. Again, we have used the word migration, but the support has to be there. The point that Mizan has made about, you know, quoting me, that migration is the failure of adaptation and also an opportunity beyond adaptation. Of course, if there is an opportunity, if it becomes opportunity, if we plan it, activate it, and give the opportunity to the recipient. If it's random, then it undermines both the human capacity and the need. So if there has to be a structure, the government has to be part of this. We have to do obviously more research at the ground level to clarify some of the ideas, some of the science, some of the recommendation much sharper, and we can take it to the government. I have the pleasure of sitting with many government commissions and policies, and I happen to be the team leader of the National Determined Contribution of the government of Bangladesh. So there are opportunities in which, and the National Adaptation Plan that we are doing, I am one of the co-leaders of one of the groups. So we have to be able to take those and take it up, but it's just not Bangladesh, it's across the world. Here we are talking about Switzerland representing the other world, and Bangladesh representing the world from where migration or climate vulnerability is one of the highest. So that is the microcosm in which we can imagine how we can take it forward for global phenomenon. And through better research, I'm offering my research opportunity services to Dr. Vally and Dr. Nicole and Celestine, so that we can take this further in a deeper sense and help how to structure it for the government, then start negotiating with the government. At this point, we are not yet ready to start negotiating with the government. That will happen. There is sensitivity, there is acceptance. They do realize that here is an opportunity if done properly. So that is where we have to go in. And it has to be national and international. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your useful insights there. And we will take you up on your offer, I'm sure. So thank you very much for your, also to be realistic there, that we are not yet ready to now have very clear policy recommendations maybe, but certainly we would like to strive for some very concrete recommendations that we can then help the government to look into this further and support the communities. Is there anyone else who would like to respond to my question? Something I realized when I was reading the article is like there's a number of different policy choices here, really, isn't there? I mean, on the one hand, you could say, well, we help local communities to adapt with alternative livelihoods and things around, you know, different agricultural crops, other skills, other occupations, or farm occupations, and go in that direction. Or do we say, well, actually, the situation is such and the future will not improve. It will certainly not improve. It will deteriorate. It will become worse. So in that situation, then the best strategy is really to have a more structured and planned migration so that people can find employment, find opportunities elsewhere. Just to put it very black and white here. So yeah, what policy choices are there for government really?
Celestine, may I intervene here? Yeah, so from my experience under this project, actually, we provided skills training to some youth population in the region. And, you know, actually, I met many of them at the community level. And, you know, I can remember that one, you know, young person is only 20 or 22 years old. He actually said that when he, you know, completed SSC, secondary school certificate exam, and then his father actually was a carpenter, and his father was forcing him to join this boy in carpenter activity. And actually his father used to do it in different districts, so it was not so static. So for example, he used to work in Kurla, for example, and then Dhaka sometimes, and then other districts. And then the person said that he was very much frustrated, and he told me that I was not accepting to join the carpenter activity because I can see the whole life of my parents and how the economic condition we are at this moment. So that's why he was very much frustrated. And at this time, actually, he actually received offer to have a skill training on mobile servicing from the project. And then he completed it, and then he started a small shop at the village level. And he said that he can earn 500 to 700 taka in season, and off season, I mean, more than 1,000 taka. So it means actually not only one, there are some other cases that we provided skills training in that reason that, you know, if they have this kind of skills, they can actually use these skills for alternative livelihood. So that's why, you know, the government should have very concrete plan to increase skills or upskill of the people in that region so that they can find their livelihood either in the community or anywhere else they like to migrate within the country or, you know, internationally. So that's the thing that the government of Bangladesh can take up. And so far I know that the government of Bangladesh has already taken initiatives to increase the skills of its human resources. Yes, it's both for you know, creating opportunities of employment in the country and also in different countries. So I think this would be an interesting point for Bangladesh government to start up. And that's why we can think this as an entry point to do advocacy with the government of Bangladesh. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shakirul, for also ending with an anecdote from the communities again. So we're back with, you know, to the community and to the perspective of the people that we were talking about here. So that's very nice. I'm afraid I need to close here because we are exactly now 4 o'clock. And so this is the end of this session. Well, there's many takeaways, I think. The rural-urban linkages still come to my mind, but also the local global We've talked about the links to the global and global policies, global governance. We've talked about local and livelihoods and how these livelihoods change and require skills development so that people can change to the alternative livelihoods. And one of them is migration, but also going to have different occupations. Now, as you just mentioned lastly with this interesting case now, this nice anecdote. And yeah, there are many other takeaways. I'm looking forward to the minutes. And for the sake of time, I would just like to now thank everybody for participating and participating actively for all your questions. I hope we were able to somehow address your questions. I know that Shakirul was very busy in answering them in the Q&A. And I do hope this is not the last session we will have. I think this was a very interesting discussion. I would look forward to more such discussions now and to take further the discussion to the next level. And then to finally also come up with some very good key recommendations for the government of Bangladesh. And thank you very much, Professor Atiq, Professor Vally, for joining us. Dr. Mokhlesur, I hope I say your name right. Nicole for joining us from Switzerland. And also Shakirul for your presentation. Thank you very much. And to all participants, also to our partners, ICAT, thank you for organizing this. And our other partners in Panijibon who one way or another also contributed to our insights and our learnings in Panijibon, DORP, EDPC, ICAT already mentioned, of course, our donors, Climate Justice Resilient Fund and City of Zurich. And special thanks to Ashish for coordinating and Istiak from ICAT for coordinating and organizing this session. And for Nicole and Esther for encouraging us to continue with the study and for making good and critical comments and improving it all the time, no? So thank you very much for everybody. And Chakaria and Nafisa from OKUP, you have been taking minutes. People did not notice, but now I'll tell them. We have minutes and 2 people have been elaborating the minutes. So looking forward to that small report from your side. Thank you very much. And I wish also to tell you that there will be a publication of this research tentatively for March or April. We're hoping to actually publish this. And then you will have also, of course, access to this study. So Ashish, do you have anything else to add or shall I close here?
Only to thank all. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining. It was very much a pleasure to meet all of you and to have this discussion.
Thank you.
Okay. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And thank you very much, Dr. Vally, for your insights and inputs. It's really interesting. So maybe we will have more opportunity to work with you together on this issue. Thank you very much. And thank you, Atiq sir. Yeah. Sorry, and thank you, Atiq sir, for your valuable interventions. It was really very encouraging and knowledgeable for me, particularly. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Nicole. Thank you.
Bye.